So we can't get Del Toro's Ron Perlman-led Hellboy 3. Maybe with the boatload of talent they're throwing at this reboot, it's the next best thing. Maybe? Hellboy 2019 stars David Harbour of Stranger Things fame as Hellboy, a role he took over from the beloved Ron Perlman in the previous 2 installments, which we'll refer to as the Del Toro Hellboys, seeing as how they were written and directed by Guillermo del Toro. Let's get it out of the way in the beginning. I am a huge fan of the original 2 Hellboy movies. I thought Ron Perlman was a great Hellboy. He brought just the right amount of attitude, gusto, and humor to the role that really brought it to life and made the character very likable. And yes, I, as many, was very disappointed when we finally got 100% confirmation that Hellboy 3 just wasn't gonna happen. And I know a lot of people took issue with this movie before it even came out because they kind of viewed this movie as one of the reasons that we weren't gonna get Hellboy 3. If you do your research, you'll find that this isn't the reason we're not getting Hellboy 3, but this is more of a result of us not getting Hellboy 3. So besides using the same source material, this Hellboy film has absolutely no relation to the original 2. And while I am sore about not getting that part 3 that I really wanted, I told myself that I'm gonna give this one a chance and let it stand on its own merits. So with that, how did it stand? Like an epileptic with scoliosis at a rave, that's how. This motherfucker just fell flat. I wanted to like this movie. I really, really did. Because even though it's not the one I initially wanted, it's still Hellboy, and I really like Hellboy. And the movie had a lot going for it. David Harbour from Stranger Things, which granted, I really don't know him from much more other than Stranger Things, but in Stranger Things, he's great. Him done up as Hellboy actually does look good. Not as good as Ron Perlman did, but hey, that's Ron Perlman. They didn't even have to use much makeup for that guy. That's just how his face looks. Unlike Ron Perlman before him, looking at this incarnation of Hellboy, you can't really tell that it's David Harbour under all that. But I don't hold that against the guy, it's just that Ron Perlman has such a distinct look. But overall, the design of Hellboy this time around, I really liked. He looked good. Neil Marshall, the director, has made some really great films. 2 of his earlier films, Dog Soldiers and The Descent, you should really check out because they're great films. When I heard that he was going to be behind the camera on this, that did fill me with a little bit of hope. But then I saw the movie, and all that hope was just sucked right the fuck out. There's been tons of talk about what went on with this movie behind the scenes. There apparently was a lot of conflict between the director, Neil Marshall, and the producers. They were going back and forth the whole time with some type of pissing contest power struggle as to how they thought this movie should be made. And while I don't know all the details to that, it really shows on screen. The story here's okay. Really, the actual story itself isn't that bad, but the execution of the story is god-awful. Several hundred years ago, this witch was just fucking up everybody's day, and apparently King Arthur just had too much of that shit and came along and just said, "Bitch, sit down." They cut her ass the fuck up and spread her across the land. Fast forward to modern day, and some of her minions are trying to gather up all her body parts and put them back together. Some other inconsequential shit happens. They finally get her all together, she comes back to life and goes to wreak havoc on modern day. And of course, Hellboy has to step in to save the day. There's a little more to the story, but that is the basic premise. And like I said, as a whole, the story itself, the basis of it, is not really that bad. It's nothing special, but I mean, we've seen this type of story throughout tons and tons of comic book movies. But the execution is just really bad. This movie's all over the place. The way that this movie is edited together is just awful. I don't mean the in-scene editing, the way shots are edited together, that's fine. But the way the scenes throughout the movie are just put together is very disjointed. If I had to think of one word to describe this movie that's constructive, that word would be disjointed. Characters end up places and we really just don't know how they got there. They'll be having a conversation in this scene about a thing that seems important, and then all of a sudden the next scene they're in a totally different place and it's like that conversation never even happened. Plot points come up randomly throughout the movie and then they're just forgotten about just as quick. There's one particular point that comes up that actually seemed very interesting and I thought would have been really cool to explore. Without ruining it, it does concern Hellboy and these other monsters and how he views them and himself within the world. And the scene in which it comes up, his reaction is just really over the top about it. Not to say that he couldn't eventually arrive at that reaction, but in the context of the movie, we don't really see that progression. It's like we're missing a bunch of scenes before that that led to this. It was a very interesting point though, and one that I really wish they had fleshed out. But after that scene, I think it comes up like one other time later in the movie for just a minute, but it's more or less just forgotten about and not mentioned again. I really feel like there's a much longer cut of this movie that makes a lot more coherent sense, because it seems like the movie should have been longer, but it's just missing lots and lots of scenes. And those scenes were probably character building scenes, and somebody, I don't know if it was the producers, the studio, or what, just came along and said, nope, that talkie shit's gotta go. We need more blood, guts, and action. Move this shit on! Either that or the script was written with some type of scenes along those lines. But as it stands, it's just a jumbled mess. So what about the performances? Are they at least good? It's kinda hard to tell. Some of them seem good, but the movie's so disjointed that it does affect the performances. So the overall vibe that you get from the whole thing is that no, they're not any good. David Harbour and Ian McShane, which plays Hellboy's dad, both do a pretty good job here. They're not awful, but unfortunately they are in an awful movie. But those two do lead to one thing I really did like about this movie. While it is an extremely low supply, the scenes of those two together with those father-son bonding moments, I actually preferred in this movie over the original Hellboys. That father-son dynamic between those two is very central to Hellboy's character. And the scenes where McShane and Harbour interact together as father and son are some of the movie's best. Though overall, it only makes up 5, maybe 10 minutes of screen time. Regardless, I did enjoy that dynamic in this movie. The villain of the Blood Queen, played by Milla Jovovich, is okay as well. She's not awful, and yes, some people have complained about her performance, but compared to everybody else, I think she does a fairly good job with what she's got to work with here. The other performances in the movie are fine, I guess. They're nothing special. I mean, the overall tone of the movie and how it is so disjointed and kind of crap kind of brings it all down, but compared to everybody else, they're all about the same level. With the exception of Sasha Lane, who plays Alice, which ends up through a course of events being one of Hellboy's kind of sidekicks. We've seen Sasha Lane in other movies, and I know that she can act, but this was not the vehicle for her. For starters, the biggest thing I just couldn't get past was her accent. I'm not really that picky. When it comes to bad accents in movies, usually they don't bother me. But hers just really stood out here. She plays a British character who talks with a British accent, or at least something they're calling a British accent. For those of you that don't know, Sasha Lane is American. She does not have a British accent naturally. And her faux British accent that she puts on display here is not very good. In fact, it is so exaggerated that it really pulls you out of the movie pretty much any time she speaks. Which is really weird, because Neil Marshall, the director of the movie, is British, so you would think he'd be able to kind of say, hey, that doesn't work so good. Let's try that different. Let's tone that down or something. I don't know. Better yet, why did she have to have a British accent? I get that the character has a British accent, but within the confines of this story, there was no reason that she had to have one. Yes, she's in England when we meet her, but there was nothing keeping them from saying that she grew up in America and then came to Britain. Or if you want to stick with the roots of her being an English character, say she was born in England and then when she was very young went to America, and then as she got older she came back to Britain. I don't know, there's tons of things they could have done there with just a few lines of dialogue that would have fixed the whole problem in no time at all. But instead they decided to give her this British accent that's just 100% totally unconvincing. I mean, really, man, it sticks out bad every time she speaks. So yeah, overall the performances in the movie just aren't really that great. They're okay at best. Which in a movie like this, these performances probably would have been passable had the movie itself not been so bad. But as it stands, you just notice how bad they are even more. So maybe the action will make up for it. Yeah? Kinda, sorta, but not really. The action in this movie actually does range from okay to pretty good. More okay than pretty good, but still not bad. But once again, much like the performances, which are okay, but are brought down by the film surrounding them, the action scenes are brought down by really inconsistent CGI. Some of the CGI in this movie looks pretty good, but then in the very next scene, it'll look like absolute trash. As with most movies, the practical effects here look really good, especially the character of Baba Yaga, which is definitely a high point for this movie. So as to not spoil one of the limited good parts of this movie, I'm not going to say much about the Baba Yaga. But the few scenes with her in them are some of the movie's best, and she is extremely unsettling. And while those practical effects look really good, a lot of the CGI in this movie is just really shoddy. And I'm really okay with CGI not being like top tier, as long as it's believable enough. And even the bad CGI movie isn't like Mortal Kombat Annihilation bad, but inconsistent CGI is a problem. When right here you got CGI that looks really damn good, but then in the very next scene, if not in the same scene, you got CGI that just doesn't come anywhere near that. It really stands out and makes you notice how inferior it is to this over here. Even if it was all of that inferior quality, if it was consistent from beginning to end, it wouldn't be anywhere near as noticeable. Like I said, the action scenes in this movie are okay. They're enjoyable enough. As with the rest of the movie, it seems like they are missing something. Like there's scenes leading up to that were cut out that would give the scene more weight and make it more enjoyable overall. But as they stand as just standalone action scenes, they're still pretty good. They don't mean shit to you when they happen, but from an execution standpoint, they're pretty good. And then there's the R rating. Yes, this version of Hellboy is rated R. But as I've mentioned in other reviews, rated R does not a good movie make. Now granted, there are some franchises that an R rating just works better and is kind of needed. But I don't think that Hellboy is one of them. That's not to say that an R-rated Hellboy can't be good. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that a PG-13 Hellboy absolutely can be good because we've already seen that 2 times. That doesn't mean that I think the movie should have been rated PG-13, but the R-rated aspects of this movie seem very tacked on. It almost seems like they decided to make this R-rated halfway through production. The movie is loaded with gore and language, which I'm fine with that. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. But all that R-rated goodness seems very forced here. A lot of the things that make this movie R-rated seem like they may have been added in post. Much of the gore is CG, and you can totally see how it would have gone down less gory. And a lot of the language is used in ways that seems like it could have been done with ADR. Maybe they did go into this with an R rating in mind, but I don't think they went into it with the right mindset. It seems like they wanted to make an R-rated comic book movie to try and capitalize on that recent R-rated comic book movie craze. Which, I mean, I will commend the studio for greenlighting an R-rated comic book movie, especially a franchise that was already cemented as a PG-13 franchise. But if you're going to do that, do it right. Make that R rating have meaning and stand for something other than just dollar signs. In the last 20 minutes or so of the movie, it does seem like things start to come together. That last segment of the movie does seem more coherently put together overall. It doesn't seem like nearly as much, or if any, is missing from that like the rest of the movie. And that last part of the movie is much more enjoyable than the rest of the movie. But honestly, at that point, it's too little too late. You've already sat through an hour and a half of this incoherent mess, and now you want to make an effort? By that point, you've checked out and you're done. Guys, I'm really sorry to say that I just didn't like this movie. I really wanted to like this movie because I am such a Hellboy fan. And while I know that fandom can cause some people to just dislike anything that's different from the thing that they love, with me it was a little bit of the reverse. I think I gave this movie a lot more goodwill than some people would. Because I love this character and this universe so much, I wanted it to succeed. But about halfway through, I just had to admit to myself, this just isn't a good movie. I do believe that there is a much longer, more fleshed out, and probably overall better cut of this movie out there. Whether we'll ever see it or not, I don't know. And if there is one, it could be the greatest comic book movie ever made. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what we got. What we got was this movie. And while the movie's not a total dumpster fire, it's definitely not worth any of your money and worth very little of your time. At best, if you don't have anything else better to do, check this out on USA Up All Night. It's been a while since I gave that rating to anything, and while yeah, this movie's not absolute garbage, it's not far from it. So there it is, guys, my review of Hellboy 2019. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
This is not gonna work, you know, because I'm a Capricorn and you're fucking nuts!
I hate to trash this movie, but god damn, it was just bad. I mean, you guys had a good thing going. Why not just give us Del Toro's Hellboy 3?
Why?